It's Thursday, April 4th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News' podcast. This is Cyril Josh Barker and Stefan Johnson coming to you from the offices of the New York Amsterdam News. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about several stories, including the recent guilty verdict of murder suspect Chanel Lewis and Attorney General Letitia James's lawsuit against an opioid distributor. But first, I've got your AM News headlines. On page 1, we have Chanel Lewis found guilty, appeal imminent by Stefan Johnson, highlighting the recent outcome of the second trial of the Queens murder suspect. Lawyers from the Legal Aid Society said they plan to file an appeal for Lewis, who is facing life in prison without parole. We also have a story about State Attorney General Letitia James's lawsuit against opioid distributor Purdue Pharma. James says the distributor played a role in the opioid epidemic that has killed tens of thousands of people in New York State. Inside on page 3, we have coverage of the 28th Annual National Action Network National Convention that kicked off this week. The event, hosted by the Reverend Al Sharpton, has several speakers, including Democratic candidates who have declared their run for the 2020 presidential election. And those are just a few of the headlines that we have in the New York Amsterdam News. But Stefan, I got to talk to you first about, did you hear about the news that broke today involving the Eric Garner case?
No, I did not. What happened?
Yeah, so in the Eric Garner case, the NYPD's chief surgeon determined that NYPD police officer Daniel Pantaleo, you know, the guy that did the chokehold in 2014, did not use a chokehold against Eric Garner in 2014 when he was killed by officers in Staten Island. The announcement was made during a hearing for Pantaleo at NYPD headquarters. That was today, Thursday, April 4th, just maybe about a few hours ago.
Now, is he basing this on some sort of technical rule?
It's
not technically a chokehold, but
exactly.
It ended up being, is that what's going on?
You know what? I'm not too sure. This is actually just something new. We'll probably discuss it a little bit later next week. But if you can recall, we all saw that video of Eric Garner. There's no doubt in my mind that was a chokehold. So I don't know what this. And mind you, we've had discussions here at the paper and just on other shows that we do outside of the paper about the police policing the police. We are always talking about that here at the AM News. And this is an NYPD surgeon, one of their surgeons, who said that Daniel Pantaleo did not use a chokehold against Eric Garner. So we're definitely going to be following that story in the coming weeks. You can also check up updates on that on amsterdamnews.com. So we'll be having that. Well, another crazy news week, but first I have to say, this is the for real first episode of the podcast because we were going to do it last week, but we had some issues. But we're good now. The sound is good. Everything is fine. So we hope that you will join us every week. This podcast will be posted on the website. You can also download it on SoundCloud. We're going to put it there. Trying to get it on Spotify and some other places, but for now, going to have it on Spreaker.com and SoundCloud, and we'll be putting that link out on the website. But busy week for you, Stefan. You had another front page story. You had front page stories this week about Chanel Lewis, the situation there where he was found guilty. I know I have my issues about that case. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you think about it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot. Many issues, I should say, with this story.
Right.
Of course, this was the second trial of Chanel Lewis because the first one ended in a hung jury. They said there wasn't enough evidence, DNA or otherwise, to convict him.
Right.
So usually when it comes to the state doesn't like to get it wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so there was a second. So this second case, they introduced DNA evidence and sort of rehashed what happened the first time. Now, a few details that the listeners need to know is that when Chanel Lewis was apprehended the first time, he was interrogated, or at least held for 12 hours.
Right.
Was interrogated, confessed to the murder of Karina Vetrano twice.
Right.
But each story, he changed details. So his legal representation at the Legal Aid Society felt the way about that, felt that he was coerced into the confession, and there were a few issues with that. On top of that, the NYPD story of how they apprehended Chanel Lewis changed, where initially it was going into their records and seeing that he had a couple of arrests involving being in the park after hours and public urination and everything else. And due to all of these matches, they matched the DNA and everything else. Now, the other story was that a police officer who's from Howard Beach, who lives in the area where Karina Vetrano lived and where the murder occurred, on Memorial Day, I believe last year or the year before, he was off duty. He had his little daughters in the car with him.
Right.
Spotted this young black man walking around, thought he looked suspicious, decided to tail him and called 911. When he was approached by police, he said that he was just looking for a place to eat. Now, mind you, he lives in East New York.
Okay.
They're in Howard Beach. When he said he was looking for some place to eat, the cops put him in their car and drove him to a McDonald's in the Rockaways.
Okay. Which is a little ways down. I know the area. A little
ways away. So a lot of it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
There were issues surrounding how DNA evidence was handled when Karina Vetrano's body was found.
Okay.
There were just issues all around. So when they got this conviction, there was applause, there were cheers from Vetrano's family.
I saw it on TV.
And understandably so, because you want to believe that justice was served for your daughter.
Right.
Talking with Charles Barron, talking with the members of the legal representation at the Legal Aid Society, they feel like this was sort of a bashed up job by the NYPD, who, since they couldn't get a conviction the first time, they wanted to make sure that they got him this second time.
Right.
So Legal Aid Society representatives, they're planning on appealing this.
Yeah.
This young man could face up to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Yeah. What I think is that we just definitely should mention, this is actually the second trial for Chanel Lewis. The first one, if you didn't know, was resulted in a hung jury. Disappointed the family. Disappointed a lot of people. Let me just say this. Two things I want to say. Ever since this case started, there's been a lot of things that I've noticed. For one, Nayaba Rinde, our editor, even said it, and there's no doubt that just looking at this dude on TV and looking at the picture that we used the screenshot from him when he was getting interrogated, this dude is not well. And something is not, he does not look capable of even committing such a crime. And there's so many theories about who did it, what happened. You can make whatever you want up. You can read, not make up, but you can, based on the information that we have and what you're seeing in the news elsewhere, you can make your own assumption or whatever you want to do. But just looking at this picture, this dude does not look well. In fact, there were some discussions about him being autistic and somewhere on the spectrum.
There's some issues regarding that, and I was talking with New York State Assemblyman Charles Barron, and he believes that the killer's still lurking out there, that this is a miscarriage of justice.
Absolutely.
And there are many issues. Matter of fact, I want to read a quick passage from the story just to
go ahead.
Just to add on top of what we've been discussing. So, quote, at the end of last week, Lewis's defense said they received an anonymous 3-page letter stating that the NYPD conducted a racialized search after DNA phenotype test showed that the material collected from the crime scene was from a black male.
Okay.
This allegedly led to then Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce to take DNA of all black men arrested in Queens and Brooklyn and swab anyone who had been arrested in Howard Beach. This led to more than 360 black men being swabbed for DNA. Police arrested Lewis based on an alleged DNA match, but experts have questioned whether or not it was conclusive. So that right there shows you that this isn't the end for this story.
I said when this story came out and we were talking about it, I said this is going to be, in my opinion, I think it's going to be another Central Park 5 situation all over again. They're going to find somebody else's DNA that matches, and this guy's going to be freed by God knows how many years he'll spend in prison. I don't think he did it. Also, I think that there's two things. Howard Beach, we're both black. You're actually a native New Yorker. I'm not. I've been living in New York for about 11 years now. It's sad to say that there are some places in the city I know where not to go, and Howard Beach is one of them. I even hate getting off of the train to go to JFK at Howard Beach, just because I don't know what's going to happen to me. Even though you don't go, into the station, outside of the station to get to the air train to get to JFK, I get just a little nervous even getting out there, or even when I'm going to the beach in the summertime to go to, Rockaways. I go to Reeves Beach out there, Far Rockaway, and you got to change trains at Howard Beach or get off at Howard Beach to change trains to get to the shuttle. And even then, I hate waiting out there because I just know the history of what black people have gone through at Howard Beach with. What was the situation? What was
Michael
that case?
Griffiths.
Michael
Yeah,
Griffiths. Yeah, that's
was
the first thing that comes to my mind whenever I think of Howard Beach. I think of just, and it's sad that in America in 2019, there are places we as black men, black people cannot go to because we just know what the outcome is going to be. So just considering the history of Howard Beach and their treatment of black men, and a situation like this. I mean, here's the thing. Right now, I mean, it's always easy to, whenever you have a murder of a white woman or a racial situation like that, it is, the police are so quick to find somebody who may not look like or fit the description of who they want to be the suspect. So I can't. I think that this case we're definitely not done with this. Appeal imminent. So many cases out there, like the Central Park 5 situation, where years later, decades later, we see DNA evidence, and that these people are falsely convicted and all this. And so and then the family. I mean, my heart goes out to the family, young lady that was killed. So sorry for the family, but the way they reacted, 2 times, they were really looking forward something to happen here. And we had, our front page just basically says, in fact, we were discussing it before we did it, and it was injustice served. People are talking about justice served for whoever, but injustice served to this young man who was not, who I don't think is guilty. Bottom line. All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about my story. Did you see on front page we got AG James sues opioid distributors? One of the things about working here at the New York Amsterdam News is that we try to take stories that are in the mainstream news, and we try to get the black spin on it. How is this issue affecting black people? I'll be honest with you. I did a story this week about the opioid distributors and how State Attorney General Letitia James is suing the Shackler family, who owns Purdue Pharma, who is the developer of OxyContin. And I didn't know this. I want to read y'all some numbers. It says, according to the New York City Health Department, black New Yorkers had the largest increase in the rate of opioid-involved overdose deaths for the second year in a row, a 93% increase in 2016, and a 28% in 2017. Didn't know that. And then also, just to give you some basic numbers from the Center of Disease and Control about opioid, we hear a lot about this in the news. Between June 2017 and June 2018, a record 31,500 people in the U.S. died from synthetic opioid overdoses. In 2017, more than 3,200 New Yorkers died from opioid overdose. So this is a real issue that, I'm going to be honest, the way mainstream sets it up, it seems like it's a white folk issue, but it's really not. And what I found more interesting is you're a Bronx guy. You're from the Bronx. You live in Queens now. I'm a Bronx guy by honor because I live there now. I've been living there for the last maybe 3 or 4 years, about 3 years now. And this issue about drug overdose is really an issue in the Bronx. I had no idea about that. And so what Attorney General Letitia James is doing is she is suing the Shackler family, who is the owner of Purdue Pharma. They're saying that they contributed to the opioid epidemic. And I think that's so important. And also, I just want to point out that there's also another lawsuit against this family in Massachusetts with the attorney general there, who's saying that they need to be held accountable for these overdoses.
Starting in the late 90s, the goal of his family was to get this drug out there to everyone and tell doctors about it and get doctors to prescribe it. Like, now you're hearing
it's everywhere.
Now you're hearing some doctors talking about rolling back prescribing these type of drugs to people.
Right.
But what ends up happening is when you have people who are genuinely in pain and need some help, now they're complaining that they're not going to get the proper dosage for them to deal with their pain.
Okay.
But this issues with opioids have been a problem for a very long time.
Right. This is not news.
It's only until very recently that we started talking about treating opioid addiction with care and treating opioid addiction as an actual addiction and a disease as opposed to something criminal.
Right.
Now, this happened to coincide with the, I guess, the platforming of the opioid epidemic that's happening in rural America in particular.
And that's
particularly white rural America.
Exactly.
And being a native Bronxite, even here in New York City, 'cause, you know, it's just, it's, 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 the issue of the opioid epidemic was sort of focused on places like Staten Island.
And before we did this story, because when I got the assignment from the editor, Naba Rinde, I'm going to be honest, my first thing is, what does that got to do with us? And then when I started researching about what this is actually doing to our community, doing to our folks, it's a real issue. I just want to read something else. Of the black New Yorkers who died from drug overdose in 2017, the largest number lived in the Bronx. Among black New Yorkers, residents of the Bronx and Manhattan had the highest rates of overdose. In 2017, the rate of overdose death was highest among black New Yorkers for the first time in over a decade compared to Latino and white New Yorkers. And that's just I'm going to be honest. When I saw those numbers, because again, one of the things that we like to do with a lot of our stories, we'll get a story that might be real popular in mainstream media, and we really want to try and focus and get an understanding to our audience as to how this is affecting them. This opioid crisis is really affecting us as a community. And the thing is, a lot of people know somebody. It might be you, or it might be somebody in your family, and who's been through a surgery, who's been through that pain. And this all kind of goes back to, it's interesting, there's a lot of distrust in the black community when it comes to the medical profession. And so one of the things, we did a story, well, I think it's just common knowledge that people know this because it's been in the news a few times, about how medical doctors will give less pain relievers to black patients as opposed to white patients. And there's this notion that goes far back even to slavery about how African Americans, a lot of white doctors think that African Americans, black people, feel less pain than whites do. So a lot of times we're prescribed fewer doses or less, pain relievers. And so that's where this opioid thing comes into, because opioid, if you know, is a medication used for treatment of moderate to severe pain. And so if you're going through that pain, and the other thing is a lot of people are not getting it through a doctor or through a pharmacist. They're getting it. A lot of people share pills. A lot of people don't know that. They know someone who might have some pills or have some opioids or something, and they'll say, oh, well, can I get some or something like that? I hate to bring this, but you saw Roseanne, right?
Yes.
The new show, The Connors. You know she died on the show because of a drug overdose. And one of the reasons that she died, and I hate to bring it to Roseanne after what she did, is that they noted that there was a network of people that were basically sharing drugs between each other. Oh, you have some. Okay, I'll take yours. And that's what's happening here. We're not being prescribed properly the pain relievers that we need. So we're getting it through means that are dangerous because we're taking drugs. We don't know how our body's going to react to it. And that's what's happening. And I had no idea until we did this story. I'm so glad we put it on the front page. We learn a lot here when we do stories here at the Amsterdam News. And this was just definitely something that I learned. And I'm so glad that we're able to focus on it. So the other thing I got to mention, a couple things. Yesterday. Oh, we have to talk about Nipsey Hussle, bro. We got to talk about Nipsey Hussle. Oh my God! So, if you don't know, Nipsey Hussle died Tuesday, April 2nd, Los Angeles. Was shot in front of his store by a 29-year-old. The name of the suspect is Eric Holder. And so, go ahead. I'm gonna let you talk because you're the hip hop head. I like hip hop too, but you really
the
are.
Story, like the more that details emerge, like the sadder it gets, because this was a man who was actually about helping his community.
Exactly.
Whether it's through business ventures, entrepreneurship, teaching young people how to carry themselves and how to operate, and just he was beloved. And the issue goes is that the only reason he was even at the store, his store at the time that he was shot, was one of his homeboys had just came home after 20 years.
Right. I knew that.
And he wanted to go to his store to get his boy some gear so that he would look nice when he greeted his family after coming back home. Okay. So he was in the store there. He gets into an argument with this guy who allegedly in that neighborhood was a well-known snitch. Okay. And Nipsey knew he was a snitch and told him he wasn't welcome in his store, and kicked him out. The guy had left, came back with a gun. Wow. And you're seeing, and especially if it's the death of a well-known individual, social media is not the place to be on in the immediate aftermath.
Absolutely not. So, no.
Because if everyone has these conspiracy theories,
I've seen so many of them.
And personally, I understand why these conspiracy theories emerge, because people want to believe that a person's death had to be or needs to be a little more noble for a person who of that stature who is helping a community.
Right.
And the lesson that no matter who you are, bullets don't have names on them.
Absolutely.
And it's really, really a sad loss. And you saw people all over the entertainment industry paying their respect. Even in the NBA, you saw basketball players, especially those from Southern California, doing their own little tributes to him on the court or after interviews. So this is massive. This is a significant loss for music. This is a significant loss for hip hop, and it's sad all around.
One of the conspiracy theories that keeps coming up, and I've seen this all over social media, is that Nipsey Hussle was doing a documentary on the late Dr. Sebi, and that's something that's coming up quite a bit, and there have been quite a few people. In fact, one in particular, Nick Cannon, has said, I don't know if you saw this earlier this week, said that he is vowing to complete Nipsey Hussle's Dr. Sebi documentary. And that's just, I think that's notable to do for him. I think he should do it. And that's one of the main theories, is that because Dr. Sebi basically had the cure for so much stuff, if you recall, so many things that would basically wipe out or even alleviate the need for many of the drugs that we take for pain relief or for diseases and things like that. So a lot of theories going on with that. There's something that said, I just saw something 3 days ago that said the Illuminati killed Nipsey Hussle. I'm not even going to touch that.
That's the thing. People want to believe that his
death
deserves something needed to be noble, because they can't believe that a person of his stature still died over some street nonsense. And that's exactly what it was. It was street nonsense. And unfortunately, it's a fate that befalls a lot of black men and black women. So.
And we talk a lot about the issue of gun violence here at the Amsterdam News, especially as it gets closer to summertime, when a lot of the kids are out of school and temperatures get high. So we have a saying here, and I'm sure, well, not just here, it's just a saying, sun's out, guns out. And we'll be talking about that probably in the coming weeks, because we usually do a story kind of introducing the whole concept of what organizations are doing to prevent shootings from happening, particularly on Memorial Day weekend when a lot of those shootings occur. So we'll be talking about that probably in the coming weeks. So definitely stay tuned and check back when we do that. We might even have some guests on for that show. We have the ability on this podcast to do phone calls, and we'll definitely be taking advantage of that. But I do have to talk a little bit about the kickoff this week to Reverend Al Sharpton's National Network 28th Annual National Convention at the Sheraton, New York, going on from April 3rd, running through the 6th on Saturday. I was there yesterday. It was a great event. Got to see Beto O'Rourke. Never saw him in person before. Was like real close. Got to see him. Let me tell you, Beto O'Rourke was pretty good. He made the news yesterday. I don't know if you saw this week. He said basically that he would support a commission to help with the commission to move forward with reparations, which is a question that Reverend Sharpton was asking, I think, pretty much every candidate. I only was there for when he asked Beto O'Rourke, but this is something that a lot of candidates are talking about. I know that Elizabeth Warren was talking about it, and now Beto O'Rourke just said that he's going to do it. So media was everywhere on that day. It really wasn't it was for Rev, but people were really trying to see Beto O'Rourke to see what he was going to do and what he was going to say. So a lot of candidates are coming, pretty much all of them. I think some of them include, let's see, we got Kamala Harris is going to be there, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kristen Gillibrand, Amy, what's her last name, I can't pronounce it.
Klobuchar.
Klobuchar, okay. And Senator Cory Booker, all going to be there this week. It's supposed to be a really good event. One of my favorites. I always usually go. Last night was last night I didn't go, but it was the Keepers of the Dream. And Marvin Sapp was there, and Ken Sunshine, who I know, the PR guy, was honored, as well as some other people. I think, let's see. I think Eric Holder, he was there, but he wasn't honored. No, okay, I got it right here. You got Robert De Niro honored last night by the Reverend Al Sharpton at that dinner, as well as Ken Sunshine. Tom Joyner, who I've known for many, many years, one of my favorite radio personalities. I grew up listening to him, so congratulations to them. Should be a great event. A lot of the candidates, this is their time to really, for a lot of them, it is their first time speaking to a mostly black audience or black voters ahead of the 2020 election. So this is such an important event for them. I believe this was Beto O'Rourke's first time speaking to black voters, speaking at the National Network. Elizabeth Warren, she's spoken to several people. This is not her first. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, this might be hers. Bernie Sanders, I think this might be his. As far as Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, here's the thing: they're black candidates running for president, but we still got to hold them accountable. With this, we've had one of the things I keep saying about this election 2020. We got Kamala Harris and Cory Booker who are running, but we've been through what it's like to have a black president, so we don't have to. We need to really hold people accountable. We've made history before; we can definitely make it again. But at the same time, we got to hold these black candidates for president accountable and ask them questions. Like, there's a lot of questions about Senator Kamala Harris's record when it comes to black men in California with her work as Attorney General. Mm-hmm. And I know that's a question that's definitely going to be coming up at that convention, and I hope it does. So, I think there's a day, I think it's Saturday or I think it's Friday, where a lot of them are going to be speaking, because Better Work went first. There were a couple other candidates that spoke yesterday. The mayor spoke yesterday, too. Along with Stacey Abrams, who we're actually trying to get to do an interview with us here at the paper. Hopefully she'll do it in the next coming months to come here to the AM News. I want her to come here so bad. She's my hero. I love her to death. I just was so heartbroken when she didn't win for Georgia. But it was stolen from her. And one of the things that she talked about yesterday, and that's no conspiracy theory, it really was, there were tactics used to suppress the black vote in Georgia. And what happened in Georgia is a serious warning alarm to all black voters to understand that there are tactics being used out there to suppress our vote. Polling places are being moved. People are being taken off of rolls. And Stacey Abrams really, really, really did a good job the other day of talking about that and addressing that issue and what she's doing. Because now she's not a politician anymore. She's gone into policy, and she has an organization where she's really trying to get to the bottom of and solve the issues surrounding voter suppression here in America, because it wasn't just in Georgia. It happened in many places, which I believe was probably the result of the election of Donald Trump. Even though Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote, there were a lot of people who didn't vote or couldn't vote not because they didn't want to. It's because there was a system put in place, tactics that were put in place to prevent them from even going to the polls, which to me is a birth. We fought so hard. Our ancestors, our parents, grandparents fought so hard to be able to have that right. And the fact that it's 2019 and we're still dealing with this issue of voter suppression is just crazy to me. So, a lot of stuff on that. Lots and lots and lots. And I just want to talk about a couple other things that we have in the paper. Former Newark Mayor Kenneth Gibson passed away. Did a story on that in our local section in New Jersey. Be sure to read that. His funeral is actually is being held this week in New Jersey. Kenneth Gibson, he was the first African-American mayor of a major city in the Northeast. And he passed away at age 86 last week, so definitely going on there. We have a wrap-up of the NAACP Image Awards done by David Goodson. I know it happened a couple weeks ago, but we got some detailed information as well as the full list of the winners. And just please go ahead and check that out. It's also online as well. You can check on that. And those are just a few of the stories that we have in the New York Amsterdam News this week. And that concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. This is Cyril Josh Barker and Stefan Johnson. Thanks for listening.